they do last very, very well. The Gruyere Veltliners, of course, equally well, if not even better. But again, the detail in this wine, for its expressiveness and size, I think is really remarkable. Now and again in my tasting notes, you will see the word salty. And it is that kind of wine that I mean. It's almost as if there is a tactile sea salt deposit that's left on your palate, on your tongue, when you're finished. And Jean-Luc will remember from his restaurant days, you almost want to get like a table crumber to scrape the salt off your palate when you finish with a wine like this. So, okay, so you see it in 2008, which is this kind of ultraviolet, cooler than cool type of vintage. And now you'll see it in 07, which is a little more lavish, a little juicier, a little smokier. And that, I think, will kind of lock in the sense of what 2008 really is.
So this is 07?
This is 07 now. Same wine, just 1 year old.
No corks whatsoever, no bottle can have any corks.
Very, very few Austrians are using corks anymore. Less than. They were much faster than the Germans. And they had very few problems with, sulfur adjustments. Of course, it remains to be seen whether the wines under screw cap will age as long as they have done under cork. But I'll tell you a cork anecdote as soon as I taste this wine. Yeah.
But if I may ask about, and I think you probably are one of the persons in this country that has tasted as many great wines that have been under this type of closure, screw caps. And there's really a big debate going on now about whether they were as great as they were supposed to be at the beginning. And I think on wine, my impression has been over the last few years that screw caps are great for young wines that are meant to be drunk very young, but there is actually absolutely no exchange of air with the outside, and that's actually almost detrimental to the aging of the wines. And I would like to know what your take on that is.
There's a very small exchange of air. And there is, of course, the oxygen that's dissolved in solution in the wine. The people to talk to about this are actually the New Zealanders who have done the experiments for the longest period of time. And there's a guy named Jamie Good, who's a scientist who's written about this subject as well. So if you Google him, you'll probably come up with some of his articles. When I have had the opportunity to taste the same wine, sort of experimental parallel bottlings under screw cap and cork, it's shocking how different they are. The bottle under cork is vastly more evolved. And we had, until we had the option of screw caps, we just assumed that that was an ordinary evolution of the wines. The thing with screw caps is, if you are impatient for the development of old flavors, that is to say, we call them tertiary flavors, then screw cap will frustrate you because it takes longer for those flavors to develop. On the other hand, you have zero risk that you're going to have to pour anything down the drain after having waited 20 years for it and set up a grand occasion for the wine to finally be uncorked only to discover that it's corked. And they will reward patience. That being said, there's always, qualifiers. It's a complicated subject. If you're a vintner who switches from cork to screw cap and you change nothing about your vinification, then I would suggest that your wine is likely to be a little bit worse under screw cap. If you know you're bottling under screw cap, then it would not be a bad idea to let a little more oxygen into the wine prior to bottling. And you also need to do a SO2 adjustment, because if you use the same amount of SO2 that you use under cork with screw cap, you are going to have some very difficult stinky wines, and they're going to be that way for 7 to 10 years after you bottle them. So, the sensitive among the growers took all those things into account, and in some cases they actually made some changes in their cellar regimes before they switched over to screw cap. So it's a work in progress, truly. And 25 years from now, it is my hope that we are going to look back on the time and say, You know, they were learning by doing, and there were a couple of stumbles, but all in all, it's a better world now that we don't have to pour wine down the drain for TCA. Another very interesting side effect of all this, producers who switched over to screw caps and still had TCA in their wines. Well, there was your wake-up call that you had TCA in your cellar, and the cork was not to blame. But how else could you have known? The cork was the easiest possible scapegoat. Oh, these damn corks, you know, these bandits, these pirates, these suppliers selling me shit all these years. But, you know, you can have TCA in cases, you can have it in pallets, you can have it in casks, you can have it...
briefly what TCA is?
It's the acronym for a chemical whose entire name I cannot even say. But it is the chemical that's responsible for the cork aroma.
Is it a molecule or is it a chemical?
It is actually a chemical. And it is so potent that you could smell it. Let's take an average hotel swimming pool, and you put one eyedropper of TCA into the swimming pool. You could smell it. That's how potent it is. Individuals have different thresholds of detection for TCA. I happen to have a high one. My wife's is even higher, which makes us very much the woosum twosum when we go out to dinner, because it's like, you know, sommeliers run screaming in the opposite direction when they see us coming. It's like, no, it's the, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Cork. We can't sell them anything. By the time they accept a bottle, we've opened 12.
Do you know if the winemakers have changed the SO2 in the actual early stages of winemaking, or just at the final bottle?
In all stages.